If you've been listening to us for a while, you've been hearing us say that you can be or do or have anything that you set your mind to, anything that you focus upon. Without exception, you can. But there is an emotional, vibrational, grid-like basis at the root of everything you want. You've heard us say, everything that you want, whether it's a relationship or a material object or a pile of money or a physical condition or a circumstance or an event, every single thing that you want, without exception, you want it because you believe you will feel better in the having of it. And so that's what we're talking about with the grid. We're talking about the feeling better with the having of it or without the having of it, the feeling better with having the knowledge that if you create an emotional grid that feels like the essence of what you think you will feel once you get what you think you want, follow all of that? If you can feel it before you get it, if you can feel the grid, if you can feel the basis, if you can find the emotional place, that simple but powerful, non-resisted vibrational place. And at the root of the grid are emotions. And we think if you would focus emotionally on your grid, in other words, if something happens, let's say that something happens, it's an awkward situation with someone you care about. And you find yourself having those same normal knee-jerk thoughts that you often have when this happens with anyone, but especially with this person. It's been going on for a while. So you have your response, which means you have just established a new vibrational foundation, or you have added to one already established. But the emotion that you're feeling of uneasiness or even anger or frustration is your indicator that you can keep this going. You certainly have the free will and the right to do it. But if you keep this going, even for as long as 17 seconds, it takes 17 seconds to establish a grid. 17 seconds to establish a grid. And as you identify something and you stay focused upon it for that little bit of time, what's going to happen is it's going to start filling in with other things like it. And so the sooner you can catch yourself with conscious awareness that you've got something going on that you might not want to wait until it fills in other words, it's easy to know you want to establish a different grid when all kinds of manifestations are occurring that you don't want. But deliberate creation really is about holding yourself in that good feeling place. So if you will think about this emotional grid in an emotional way and ask yourself, what are the emotions that I'm feeling? And more important, what emotions do I prefer to feel? You can catch this at the early subtle stages. In other words, rather than going off with law of attraction, feeding you all kinds of thoughts and memories and bringing to you all kinds of other things that match it, and other people that agree with you about the injustice that you've just lived, or other people agreeing with you about the injustice and living it around you. In other words, you can get a whirlwind, sort of like a vortex of all kinds of things going on. It can come to you really fast, can't it? But if you are wise enough to know that 17 seconds is establishing a grid here, and what am I wanting to do with my grid right now, right here, right now, right here, right now? Because every moment is new, Every moment is new. We don't want you to think that you've got a bunch of grids piled up that are going to play themselves out, because that's not true at all. The grids that you have been creating and living in the past have nothing to do with what you're doing right now, because your point of attraction is right now. This is a fresh new day and a fresh new moment and a fresh new grid in this fresh new moment, and you have control over what you do with your grid right now. Now, chances are you're going to do right now with your grid what you've been doing with your grid. You are. You're probably going to do what you've been doing because what you've been doing feels so familiar to you. It feels normal to you to observe that and feel this way. It feels normal to you. And most everybody, all those daytime talk shows would agree with you. In other words, all that reality TV, they're all feeling for you. They all know exactly what they feel your pain. They know exactly what you're going through. But you know too much now. You now know that in this moment you are establishing right here, right now, a new grid, a new grid, a new grid, a new grid. And what's at the basis of it? Is your grid getting kicked off in this moment and in this moment and in this moment based upon what you're observing, or based upon what you've lived lately, or based upon what you're remembering? How far back are you going to dredge up the grid that you don't want? And in many cases, you would say, well, I don't have to go back that far because the grid just keeps coming with me and filling in all around me. And we want you to begin to want to Take control of your grid by saying, it's new in this moment, what am I going to do about it? And if you will decide that you want it to be an emotional response that you're giving it, an emotional response. If you decide that you're going to give your grid or give your attention to this grid and that you want it to fill in with something that feels good to you, and give it emotional words. I feel appreciation, or I feel love, or I feel enthusiasm. And sometimes you don't feel it, but as you say it, as you establish your determination, doesn't it kind of feel good when the chatter stops? When you're not trying so hard to talk yourself into it, or explain your way into it or out of it, or get somebody else to get it, or to justify it, or defend it, or to protest against it, but just feel the grid. Feel it, feel it, feel it. Reach for an emotion and find it and feel it. An emotion like peace. Or an emotion like appreciation. What does the word love do for you? Now see, if you're in the middle of something that makes you feel anger, reaching for this basis, this grid, might be harder to do. But even in your small effort at doing it, it will slow down the momentum of whatever's going on. And if you start your day by reaching for it, that really is the power of meditation. Because in meditation, as you quiet your mind, you are left with that emotional basis that will serve you extremely well. We think you understand this precisely, actually. We think we've hit upon an analogy that will serve you really well. And over the next few days, as you are deliberately creating a grid and then watching it fill in, you're going to begin to feel the power of the grid, the power of your deliberate point of attraction, the power of your alignment with the source within you. Because you've been listening to us. You come forth from non-physical, and before you were in this physical body, you were non-physical, and you still are. That's a familiar story if you've been listening to us for a while. And part of you came forth into this physical body where you were exploring and taking consciousness forward, not just your consciousness, but all of us. Your exploration of contrast is causing us all to reach into these new places. And once you know what you don't want, and once you know what you do want, once you set that focus into motion, we all, from our non-physical perspective, go right there to that new place, to that new grid that your desire established. And we hold to the vibrational basis of what you have created, because we know it from top to bottom. We know not only the results you think you're asking for, or the results that you are asking for, we know the emotional basis of them. In other words, we know the essence of what you're reaching for. And we become it and hold our focus steadily on that. So you could say that we are a vibrational, emotional grid that when you reach for the feeling place of it, the influence from us will be mighty. You'll feel it. You'll feel the power and the clarity that comes when you identify something that you desire, and that something that you are desiring is an emotional, good feeling, emotional grid. We're going to move on now and visit with you about anything that is important to you. There's nothing that is off limits here. But we are enthusiastically excited about what's going to take place in your life experiences over the next few days. Because if you heard us, and we know you did, if we captured your interest in this vibrational basis, because we know many of you have been listening to us. These things are already in place for you. You believe that law of attraction exists. You've shown it to yourself. You know that you are the creator of your own reality. You've been listening to us long enough that even if you feel that you aren't creating your reality the way you want to, you believe that you are the creator of your own reality. And so now, as we talk to you about this simple platform, this simple grid that is emotion, and you convince yourself, and that's your work to do, that you have the ability, no matter what, many times in a day, to say, what's the grid going on? Esther's been catching herself. Something will happen in traffic, or she will observe something, and in her observation of it, or even comment about it, recently she's been saying, I wonder what kind of a grid I'm creating right now. And she knows full well what kind of a grid she's creating right now. And then she'll say something like, it might be interesting to watch how that fills in. It doesn't take much to get emotion going, does it? Not too long ago, she was in Del Mar driving with some of her family members. And as they were driving, they were parked at an intersection under a freeway waiting to go onto the freeway. And a car didn't follow his light guidance at all, ran a red light, and another car nearly hit it, and they were swerving and honking and missing each other. And Esther said that was a really close call. And they felt the emotion of it because it was exciting to see all of that happen right before their eyes. And then Esther felt fortunate for a moment that they had been left out of it because it was pretty close. And then she commented, it was pretty close. If they had collided, we would have been caught up in it. And then the emotion was established. She established an emotional grid. We weren't talking about the grid in those days, not to this degree. Established an emotional grid innocently. Innocently. I was just sitting there minding my own business, just observing what was going on around me like I'm supposed to do, Abraham, when I'm in traffic. And I noticed that they almost had an accident that I almost was a part of. Established a grid. Now, what's the grid? Vulnerability, people doing things to you that you don't want them to do, assertion into your experience. What's the grid? In other words, it felt uncomfortable. And then they talked about it for a while. There were 3 of them in the car, and all 3 of them, then, the grid began to fill in with other stories of other incidences like that. The grid is a powerful thing. Law of attraction is at its basis. They went one exit further and exited on the next street and pulled into a shopping center and went in to the grocery store and left the car, Esther's beautiful Cadillac Escalade. And when they came out, a teenager was standing there crying. Her father was there, enraged, and her Mustang was buried in the front of Esther's car. And the Jaguar next to it. She picked 2 really good cars. No question in Esther's mind as she thinks back on that she established a grid. Now, you could say, did the grid just start then? Well, no. Esther was already feeling a little vulnerable. So maybe the attraction of that near miss was a previous grid that was filling in. Not maybe, for sure. You sort of getting the sense of how these grids sort of pile up. So you got something going on, it's filling in. When it fills in, you establish something even more, which then fills in. You see what we're getting at? At any moment in time, you can choose, if you want to establish an emotional grid, a new basis of attraction at any time.